Good.
It's 6 p.m., so I will call this October 22nd, 2024 regular meeting of the Wenatchee School District School Board to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Esta junta se lleva a cabo en inglés, pero contamos con servicio de traducción. Si alguien gusta hacer un comentario público o recibir explicaciones en español, por favor, indique su necesidad. We will now work through the agenda. Are there any proposed changes or modifications to the agenda? Okay. Moving on, we will start with the consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda were sent to the board and posted online last week. The board's had an opportunity to review the materials and individually ask the superintendent any questions on any item on the agenda. The consent agenda includes the minutes from the October 8th, 2024 regular board meeting, the October 14th, 2024 board workshop minutes, vouchers and payroll, personnel report, the surplus report, contracts, field trips, and the September-October enrollment report. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented. I second.
So moved by Maria, seconded by Miranda. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Moving on to citizen comments. Before I read more, do we have anyone signed up for citizen comment? So we will going once, going twice. Anyone here for citizen comment? Okay, moving on then, we will go to our special presentations.
Okay, oh yeah. First up, we have our ASB presentation. So we have representatives from Wenatchee and Westside. So if Wenatchee, you're ready to rock. All right, thank you for being here.
For me from last year, but if not, hello, it's nice to meet you guys. So I'm a senior at Wenatchee High School and I am this year's ASB president. I'm really excited to fill you guys in on what's been happening this past month at Wenatchee because it's been very busy for us. So one super exciting event that had our student section absolutely packed was the Battle of the Bridges football game. We got anticipation going with a Spirit Week the days leading up to the football game. Monday was Iconic Duo, then Jersey Day, Tacky Tourist Day, Hollywood Day, and finally for our Friday night lights, we did Purple and Gold. We may have not won that game, but we absolutely felt like winners, surrounded by so much spirit and community. At halftime, myself and our treasurer, Nora Dillman, ran a competitive field goal kicking and tug of war competition against Eastmont. Following Battle of the Bridges, our ASB switched gears towards all things homecoming. The week before homecoming, we had a pep assembly where we gave a rundown of the week to follow, announced homecoming royalty for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. And then we had some performances from dance, cheer, epaulettes. We also had another Spirit Week. So our activities team actually planned an event for morning, lunch, and evening activities the whole week leading up to homecoming. So on Monday, we gave out free hot cocoa in the morning, played a movie at lunch, and had girls flag football in the evening. Tuesday was Dress as Your Favorite Holiday. In the morning, we handed out hundreds of fresh, hot pancakes. At lunch, we had a crafts table, and in the evening, students cheered on our girls soccer team. Wednesday, Fairy Tale Disney Day, we handed out tiaras to every single student who walked through the doors. Our senior senate put on a horchata sale at lunch, and finally, we had boys volleyball in the evening. On Thursday, bikers versus surfers. In the morning, we passed out leis and sunglasses to students, put on a cupcake walk at lunch, and had a co-ed soccer tournament. Finally, Friday was pink out. We had a face paint station in the morning, a photo booth at lunch, and our homecoming football game in the evening. This is where our senior homecoming royalty was announced. And on Saturday, we had our homecoming dance. The theme this year was Disney's Tangled. And thanks to support from staff and community members that chaperoned the dance, students were truly tangled in the memories. As of now, our ASB team is recovering from an eventful weekend and starting to plan for what's to come next. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much. Yes, I'll see you next month.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see here. And we have Annie Vargas from Westside, right? All right. Thanks for being here.
Hello, my name is Annie Vargas and I'm part of Leadership Club at Westside High School, and I'm here to tell you what's been happening. First off, we have full enrollment at Westside, close to 300 students. We are currently have a waiting list for all programs. Our Project Mondays are in full swing. Students all take part in one project. They range from rock climbing, t-shirt design and printing, fiber arts, team sports, career exploration, and more. Leadership Club renews our Bombast Socks partnership. They increased our donation to 10,000 pairs. We created a form for individuals, nonprofits, local service organizations, and schools to fill out to partner with us. So far, we have received already 14 requests. Our Fall Spirit Week this week and our Spirit Days are Crazy Hair Day, Dressed Like a Student or Teacher Day, Color Combo Day, Western Day, and Halloween Dress Up. Our Leadership Club is preparing for our Veterans Day Assembly. Our students will be writing veterans letters to veterans in and outside our community, which we do annually. We want to thank GISA Credit Union for their support through their debit card program. They donate over 2,300 to Westside from debit card transactions last school year. I want to thank the school board for supporting Westside students and staff. Do you have any questions for me? Perfect. Thank you, guys.
I don't have any questions, but I noticed in both the presentations, thank you both coming. You show a lot of spirit with your fellow students and a lot of outreach to benefit people in the community. So I think those are things that you should take back and to your peers and say thank you from the board.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Next, we have the Executive Director of Business and Finance show for this evening. So it's the Sean Fitzgerald show tonight, which we're excited. So Sean has a levy update and then also an enrollment update that he'll be walking us through. So Sean, thanks for taking care of the program tonight.
Thank you. Oh, clicker. Let's see this. Okay. All right. Good evening, President Norton, members of the board, and Dr. Kalahar. It's great to be here tonight. I have two presentations, one on the levy, our upcoming levy, and then walking you through our September and October enrollment report. So to begin with, we have our levy update. And topics tonight is going through some of our main topics, the preliminary assessed value amounts we received from the county assessor, which has caused us to reassess our scenarios that were presented at the board workshop last Monday. We received the amounts from the ESD and the assessor's office Thursday afternoon. And so based on those new numbers, we are revising our scenarios and giving you some updated numbers for you to consider and reflect on over the next couple of weeks as the board makes a decision on the levy rate we wish to go out for. So assessed value changes. So last Monday, we had a board workshop and we discussed our scenarios kind of based on the historical trends that we've been seeing. And on the right-hand side, we have 10 years of the historical data. And you can see constant, consistent growth that has averaged about 10% in the last 5 years. On Thursday, we received from the county assessor's office updated numbers, which essentially shows our assessed value remaining flat for the 2024 calendar year, which would affect the 2025 levy amounts because it's always based on the prior year before. So with this change, looking back at our historical data, we did notice there was a similar episode back in 2018. And so we reached out to the ESD and they were discussing with the assessor's office, what are the indicators of, the reasoning, rationale behind this. And one of the things they indicated was an affordable housing exemption So the ESD was going to follow up with the county assessor and get some more information on the rationale so we can better plan our levy scenarios over the next couple of weeks. In that time, we've reached out again to the ESD, Piper Sandler, Trevor at Piper Sandler, Jim McNeil at Foster Garvey, and several other school districts in the state who at this time recommended we go with a more conservative approach and follow a 5% AV growth model. So that with the revised scenarios, that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. Again, the numbers aren't final. We still have a few weeks to look at these numbers, but we do want to present the most accurate information we have at this time to help you in your decision making. So with the changes to the assessed value at the board workshop last week, we discussed how the high growth rate, AV growth rate in the district area has led to less local effort assistant funding from the state, which is based on changes in assessed value year to year and enrollment. Because the AV did not grow as much as we expected, it was below that 10% average. We are now seeing under these revised scenario that local effort assistance funding may play a factor, and we may receive this funding if these new trends hold. So under the original scenario, the 10%, you can see very limited LEA fundings in 2026 and eventually disappearing after that. Whereas if the growth stays around 5%, we would be receiving the local effort assistance funding from the state. And again, this is all formula driven by the legislature and is only affected by the changes in assessed value and enrollment. So whatever levy rate the district decides to go out for is irrelevant. This funding is received in addition to the voter approved levy amounts. So here's an updated chart on local effort assistant. Again, just adding an extra line to show the comparison between what a local effort assistance funding would look like between a 5% growth and 10%. So you can see here on the 5% side, we would be receiving more additional local effort funding over a longer period of time. And if AV growth, let's say, falls between 5 and 10%, you can just imagine on this chart something splitting between those two lines on the chart. So before I move on to revised levy scenarios, any questions on the local effort assistance? Right. So here's a revised, oh no, this is actually the original one. So that's a little mislabeled on the top, but 10% AV growth. This doesn't include the local effort assistance, but again, this was presented at the board workshop. The only changes I've added the maximum levy amounts that could be collected either under the tax rate lid of 250 or enrollment. And as was discussed during the board workshop last week, under this scenario, if we saw 10% growth, we could see our levy collection cap based on the enrollment lid just due to the continued and projected declining enrollment in the district. So you can see that taking effect probably in 2027, where enrollment lid would take over the tax rate lid, and then all rates would kind of converge by 2029, regardless of the tax rate.
Hey, Sean, I got a quick question for you.
Sure.
The LEA we're gonna receive regardless of enrollment. So
Regardless, oh, sorry, finish your question.
So I guess I'm looking at these trends and if we are not seeing the growth greater than 5% in assessed value, we're still going to see LEA funds coming in, even if we have changes in enrollment.
So LEA funding is affected by enrollment and assessed value, but whatever levy rate we go out for does not affect that. So if you go out for $2, $2.20 or the max, if those assessed value and enrollment trends hold, you would receive those funds in addition. Yeah. So here's the actual revised scenario, again, under a 5% AV growth. So you can see the change here. The difference is with smaller AV growth would lead to less levy revenue collection over the same time period But we would not be subject to either of the lids. We would be well below the lids with this more conservative approach. Here are the, same numbers, now just in number format as opposed to the chart. Again, these were the numbers presented at the board workshop. So again, here is 10% AUV growth. And you can see, again, the higher the rate, the more we would collect in. But also we can see starting in, depending the higher rate, the more likely you're going to be subject to the lid. So if you had a max lid, you can see where those tax rates lie in the very bottom. But if we're at 220, you can see the enrollment lid taking effect in 2028 and 2029 as we see the tax rates decrease as assessed value increases. However, based on that, your voter approved amount, what you got to collect would remain the same, subject to those lids. And here we have the revised scenario. So we can see quite a change in less revenues collected, but without the effect of any subject to any enrollment or tax rate lids. And again, the same thing holds if assessed value increases more than 5% in this scenario, the collection amounts would remain the same, but the tax rate would change or decrease as the tax base increases. Levy allocation. So based on a request from the board during the workshop to see a breakdown of how funds are going to be allocated, the next few slides is going to show a breakdown based on each levy scenario. I won't go through each one, but it'll give you time to look at and reflect because really the only changes are based on the amounts collected. But right now, the basis of the levy allocations would be currently to fund levy programs that we're already funding with our levy dollars, adjusted for annual inflationary costs. And then any additional levy revenues we would receive above and beyond that would be used to offset future budget reductions in light of declining enrollment, rising costs, and funding for programs beyond state allocations. And then again, the higher levy rate you would go for would reduce dependence on local effort assistance and provide a cushion if assessed value growth was greater than 5%. And then as a reminder, the district did refinance its bond last year, lowering tax rates by 9 cents per 1,000 assessed value, which will take effect in the 2025 calendar year. So based on the revised scenario, this is $2 per 1,000 at assessed value. And basically, this is what's presented and reviewed by OSPI. And we have our levy funding broken down by program and by object. So starting at the top, we can see that our funding programs, that funding is directed towards programs above and beyond the state allocation. So you don't see any funding allocated to CTE or Skill Center or compensatory instruction. Compensatory instruction is all like our title programs, which are federally funded, or state LAP, high poverty LAP. So those would fall under those programs. And we consider all those types of programs to be fully funded by either the state or by our federal funded sources. So we don't see a need to allocate additional levy resources to those areas. And if we look at where we're allocating those sources, basic education, special education, support services, which is district-wide support such as technology, transportation, maintenance and operations, our security SROs, all of those are funded through the levy above and beyond state allocations if we do receive state funding for those certain areas. But to highlight some of these things, 2/3 of our levy funding, so 67%, is directed to basic education and special education. And then if we're looking down at the object table, which is breaking out staffing and our material supplies and operating costs, we can see that 2/3 of our levy funding goes to staffing. And in addition to that, support services, almost 1/4 of our levy funding is going above and beyond the state allocation. And that's kind of a similar breakout in the next few slides, just for the different rates. It just shows additional funding allocated based on the collection amount. Is there any questions on the breakdown?
I do have a couple of clarifications. So all of these are the 5% increase in assessed value version, right?
Correct.
And then when we're looking at years, these are academic years as compared to tax years. So for example, 2027, which is 17.25, is halfway between 16.8. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Went through there. And and you have a capital outlay item at the bottom. Can you compare that to the current 4-year projection of 500,000 transfer from the general fund to the capital fund?
So this is different from the transfer from the capital fund. So the transfer to the capital projects fund is for emergency or priority maintenance needs. This capital outlay is to implement or to help assist in our vehicle replacement plan. And so that's where those funds are being allocated to.
You say all vehicles as opposed to buses?
Outside of buses. So buses would fall under the transportation
Other
vehicle
vehicles.
fund, but all other vehicles would be assisted in this allocation.
Are these program allocations the same as what we currently run and the same percentages of what we currently
Yes.
run?
Yes. I think the only modification I would say is the capital outlay is new.
Have we seen special education? I know that over 15% we are responsible for, since the state's not matching that funding.
Mhm.
Have we seen that growth? Do we have any way to chart what we've seen from years past to a projected growth in that kind of budgetary need?
In terms of do you mean the cap?
I just know that we were under the cap before and we're over the cap now.
Well, technically, we're still under the cap, but because of the special education needs, we are already above and beyond the state allocation. So as enrollment increases, we would receive additional funding from special education, but because to meet the needs, we already have to go beyond that.
Got it. So I guess my question is do we have any kind of estimates on what that might be in, the upcoming school years of additional needs that might be necessary?
I think it's just right now it's just discussions with the special education director and paying attention to enrollment. So definitely we've seen enrollment increase substantially since the lockdowns have lifted and allocated resources to special education. So again, it's just monitoring our enrollment trends and, and not limited to, but also paying attention to our IEP needs as well.
Great, thanks.
So I think to dovetail on that, at what point then, given the needs that we have and the continued expenses we have, is there any justification to modifying the percentage that we put of the levy dollars that we put into special ed? And, not suggesting where to take them from, but is there any basis to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think 4 years is a long time, and we can, evaluate it on an annual basis and see where we do need to allocate those resources. So I think if we do need to take a look and allocate additional levy resources to special education, we can do that.
And just a clarification on that, there isn't a student whose needs aren't being met based on the dollars. So that's not a cap of those dollars. We will meet every student's needs who have students that have disabilities. So just to make sure everyone understands that part too.
And again, the next few slides, roughly the same breakout, just with different collection amounts. Higher collection amounts. I didn't make really many changes to the capital outlay. Just so the higher the rate, more funding was allocated to the other programs like basic education and special education. Next steps, again, we have, we're looking at a special board meeting on November 6th to help finalize which rate we want to go out for on the community. And in that time, we're going to follow up with the ESD and the assessor's office and get more information on assessed value growth in the area. So we can continue to refine our numbers so we have the most accurate and best numbers for the board to make their decision on November 6th. Any other questions before moving on? All right, thank you.
Sean, you need a break or a drink of water or anything?
Now's the time. Sneak it
Right.
over. All right, moving on to our September and October enrollment report. So just to begin with, a funding overview and enrollment trends. As background, budget AA or average annual FTE drives budget our state apportionment funding from September through December. And again, once January begins, it'll be adjusted to our actual numbers and receive actual state apportionment funding based on our non-budgeted numbers. AAFT is based on the average of each month's FTE and changes after each monthly enrollment account. Now we have our September and October accounts. So September is historically our lowest count and October is our highest. And then as a reminder, Running Start and Open Doors enrollment is passed through. So whatever funding we receive for those programs, we pay out to the college for Running Start or our Open Doors program. Back in April, when I did one of my last major enrollment presentations, I identified 5 significant enrollment trends for 24-25. So the correlation between birth rates and kindergarten classes, so higher birth rates correspond to higher kindergarten classes and vice versa. We were also looking at the elementary to middle school transition. So from 5th to 6th grade, the impact of Pinnacles Prep on our enrollment. 3rd, middle school to high school transition, seeing the transfer from 8th to 9th grade. We just saw generally it was a kind of a 1-to-1. We didn't see much of a change in our historical trends between there. And then we saw 10th to 11th grade when students begin opting for Running Start. So we generally see a decrease there. And then number 5, which ties back to number 1, again, is graduating classes larger than our incoming classes, which, you know, just has the cumulative effect of on declining enrollment. So we can begin with enrollment comparisons at the grade level. So this is our budget versus actual. So on the positive side, we are doing better than budget, both at the basic ed level, which is reflected on the blue line, total of transition kindergarten through 12th grade. And our overall enrollment is doing better once we include Open Doors and Running Start. So you can see we're up overall 162 compared to budget, and half of that is due to Running Start. If we're looking through on our BEA side, if we go through the grade levels, TK, we budgeted for 56 and they are at 60, which is max capacity. So we expanded from 3 classrooms to 4. So we have classes of 15 each. And there, since September, we've been at peak capacity there and it's unlikely to change. So we see positive growth there on the TK side. Kindergarten, pretty much on par with budget, just slightly below it. We're doing better at the 1st grade level. So one of the things we're seeing as we go into further slides is, although our kindergarten classes look low, we are seeing an increase of students coming in at the 1st grade level, which is something we want to continue to monitor and look at, because perhaps parents, students have been exploring other options outside of our kindergarten, but have decided to opt in at the 1st grade level instead. We saw large growth at the 4th grade level, which was great. And then jumping down to ninth grade, which was another surprise. Again, one of our trends is the 8th and 9th grade level generally remains the same, but we saw growth of about beating our budget by 21 FTE. And one of the things is we're seeing students return from Pinnacles Prep they'll leave at the 5th grade when going into 6th grade. And this is the first year where we've seen a number of students return back to the district. So that's great to see. And then again, beating overall the 12th grade. And then with Running Start, we're at record high enrollment. We have pretty much 100 more students than we did there enrolled in Running Start than prior years. And we'll go into more detail that in later slides. And so although we're doing better than budget, which is great, compared to prior year, we are still down overall. So compared to our prior year levels, we are down almost 175 at the BEA level. And then overall, it's down about 93. And a lot of that is due to just Running Start enrollment, keeping that, explaining that variance. But again, if we're looking through each kind of our grade levels from prior years, again, we saw the growth at the TK, an expansion of one more classroom. So we've increased it by about 18 FTE. And then we look at our kindergarten classes and they look pretty much on par with last year's. And that's great. But when we're going back and looking at our birth rates, we saw a significant jump in our birth rates for this incoming class year. But then we saw actual registrations, they were on par with prior year, and that's kind of how it's turning out. So despite higher birth rates, we're pretty much staying the same level in our kindergarten class.
Hey, Sean, just a sec.
Yeah.
So it seems like we have 96 more people in Running Start. So shouldn't that be a minus? Shouldn't it be like the 174 plus 90, like when we're going down another 96?
No, Running Start increased by 96.
Right, but the district that's all passed through
Correct.
to someone else. So like, I guess I don't see that as the district has that enrollment.
Correct.
So.
No, but the variance is plus 96 in Running Start, and that 96 comes out of the other lines like 11th and 12th.
So one of the things in presenting this data, we got to present the whole enrollment. And so when we're focusing on budget and long-term things and growth for the district, we're really looking at the TK through 12 total that's highlighted in blue. So it's separated out from the Running Start and Open Doors. Yeah, we're still required to report that enrollment, even though it's passed through.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, kindergarten classes remaining the same. And then again, first grade, the second grade classes are down compared to prior year. Then we get to our third graders and we see an increase. So third graders are our largest grade cohort in the elementary level, followed by our fifth graders. So a lot of what we're seeing in the decline in the first and second grades is just, again, smaller incoming classes, while the larger outgoing class moves on to a next grade. So you can see that's reflected first, second, and third grade levels. And again, the next big drop we see at the sixth grade level, again, that's just the transition to the fifth to sixth grade, elementary to middle school. And that is the impact of Pinnacles Prep and the charter school. And then the other thing we're seeing is just overall decline at the middle school level. You can see not only just not occurring at the transition period at sixth grade, but just an overall decrease. And again, smaller incoming classes while the outgoing class moves on to high school. Again, at the ninth grade level, we're seeing an increase. So we were seeing a return of Pinnacles Prep students at the high school level. And this is really the first year we saw a big jump like that. And then again, 10th to 11th grade, we see the drop at the 10th grade level because we can see in 23-24, that class was above 600 FTE. But now that they're 11th graders, they're about 491, which means a lot of those students went to Running Start. And then the 12th grade, we see a decline of about 70 FTE from prior year. Again, you can just see the larger graduating class leaving the district. We see 23-24 at 556. Our current AAFT is 487. So even though, again, it's just a smaller class moving through the system.
Sean, quick question.
Mhm.
I know we know that this kindergarten class this year, it was a higher birth rate. I would assume that we, maybe for next year's planning, are planning on having a bubble, an increase in our first grade classes.
I think when we're looking at this, yeah, I think just following these trends, it'll be interesting to see that a jump from kindergarten to first grade if we see that
Because I do
continue.
think it's pretty common for a lot of folks to choose to not go into the schools for kindergarten because they need daycare or full-time,
Mhm.
half-time. But then they will choose, I could see that being why we're seeing the spikes in
Mhm.
first grade.
Yeah. So I think when we're doing future enrollment projections, I think that's definitely a factor that we can continue to see that jump. And we'll pay close attention to it.
Yeah, to Julie's point, there's preschools that offer TK. So regarding the TK, that could be, so we're 18 students over, obviously. Do we service only Wenatchee School District students, or are we projected to see those TK enrollments to retain them all into kinder next year?
That's a good question. I think one of the things we need to explore is, okay, TK is popular, and how many of those students are then moving on to our kindergarten classes? Are we bringing them in, or is kindergarten, people are just enrolling into kindergarten? Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No, great questions. But yeah, certainly the combination of the lower birth rates, but also increasing competition and alternatives to TK and kindergarten are definitely factors as well.
This might be for you, Corey, but if we have maxed out TKs, or is there any plan on increasing class options for next year?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have concrete plans right now, but we're talking with building administrators to see where there are points when we can grow. Yeah, absolutely.
And just to add to that, just to add to the fun, we received a notice from OSPI a couple of weeks ago saying that they had not fully funded TK for the 24-25 school year. And it is up to our state legislature in the upcoming legislative session to see if they will fix that or not. So right now, our TK program statewide is not fully funded by the state.
What is it funded at?
Well, technically, I mean, again, it's a formula. I mean, it's sufficient, like essentially it's like 15 FTE can support one teacher, one FTE teacher for the classroom. And so again, OSPI, we don't know what we're actually going to receive this year. We have our expectation based on the formula, but with this recent notice, we'll have to see what comes out this year and then what the legislature will do for funding.
But isn't the TK classroom one full-time teacher and then two paras? Is that
correct? One or two full-time paras, I'm not sure, but additional. So the teacher is funded out of the TK funding. Additional paras are coming out of high poverty lab.
Can I slightly add a question to that? Because the impression I have is not just the underfunding of this year, but there are a number of state regulations, mandates, restrictions in TK, so that it's an area where it really is pretty murky ahead as to who pays for how much. What isn't murky is that it's a good program for the students.
Mm-hmm.
And that I would therefore expect that that's something that you carefully unfold year by year.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Here's just a great band comparison. So just following kind of the classes from year to year. So basically the numbers are just kind of moving like a night across the chessboard. So kindergarten and 23-24 become first graders this year. So we can see again, that jump from kindergarten to first grade was up to 21. So again, to President Norton's point, paying attention to this trend in the coming years. If we're seeing an increase, even though we have low in kindergarten, we might see this jump at the first grade level. Second to third grade, that's our third graders are our largest elementary class. And as you can see, we lost about 16 FTE between the grade levels, although it's still above 500. Again, you can see the impact of Pinnacle's prep between fifth and sixth grade. And then we saw the increase from eighth to ninth grade of up to 21. We're seeing a return of the Pinnacle's prep kids. And then the 10th to 11th graders, again, we had that plus 600 FTE class, now down below 500, and generally consume the impact of running start at this level. Compare enrollment comparisons at the building level. So again, this is the enrollment data broken out by our buildings. This does not include running start or open doors because they are not at the building. So we're just strictly focused on what we receive funding for and our enrollment in the district. So we can see here, again, we're doing better than budget, up 85. And we can see a lot of the growth here. We're looking at the asterisks just to make clear our TK buildings. So Mission View, Newberry, and Washington all have our 4 TK classrooms. But you can see here, Mission View doing better than budget substantially by 41. This is due to the fact that they received some of the Columbia students. We, based on our budgeted projections, we thought the vast majority of our Columbia students were going to go to Lincoln and Washington, which they did, but Mission View picked up quite a few as well, in addition to their TK classroom. So that's why we're seeing such high variance there on the positive side from Mission View. And then again, just looking at some other things, Westside High School, it's down, but this is going to grow. So Westside High School always starts with low enrollment, and then its enrollment grows over the year, over the course of the school year. As you can see, September, they're at 242 and they jump up to 261 month later, and we expect that to continue to grow as it historically does. The other ones I want to draw attention to is this Valley Academy and Valley Online. So with Valley Academy, we saw record high registrations, a lot of people coming in. And right now we're about at 187. And I'll better slide illustrating it on the next slide. But we can see Valley Academy and Valley Online are both below budget. And the factors due to this is we actually saw increased in-person learning at Valley Academy, but we're seeing the overall Valley Online enrollment decreasing as more students are opting to return to in-person learning. And then another highlight is the Tech Center. So we can see it's up 25 on the budget. Generally, Tech Center enrollment hovers between 170 and 180 FTE, but we saw a lot of students enrolled this year. So that's another positive, up 25 on the budget.
And Tech Center is, we're also capturing some students from outside the district as well, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
One question, just to understand the numbers. These are all FTEs.
Correct.
So if we're talking, for example, about West Side, there will probably be more than 260 actual students with their
Correct.
feet.
Yeah, head count is generally a lot more than FTE.
And then that would match what the report we got from the student leader
Yes.
about more students. Yeah.
Yep. Good clarification. Next slide here, prior year versus actual. So again, overall down 175 from prior year. And just the comparisons. So again, we see Lincoln, Mission View, and Washington all saw substantial increases due to taking on the Columbia student transfers. We're seeing one decline at the elementary level. We're seeing at Sunny Slope, so we're paying close attention to that because it does generally stay around 300 FTE. But right now, it increased from 286 to 291 these last 2 months, so we're going to pay attention to that. Other areas of note is at our middle school level. So all three show decreases, especially most at Pioneer. And yes, we can attribute part of it to Pinnacle's prep, but they take about 30, or so FTE. So this is more than just an impact at the charter school. Could be just a combination of, again, smaller classes and larger outgoing classes moving on to the high school. But again, we are seeing decrease at the middle school level at all three schools. And then Wenatchee High, although it's still high, it's down 68 from prior year. So again, we're seeing a decrease at the high school level. West Side just on par, and we expect it to continue to grow. And then when we look at Valley Academy and Valley Online, so even though they're below budget, we can see with Valley Online, it's down from prior year. Again, the return to in-person learning as opposed to the online format. And then at Valley Academy, we're seeing an increase of in-person learning. So they're up 22 FTE from prior year. And then again, the other highlight is the Tech Center up 25 from prior year as well.
This might not be the right place for this, but like, how are we sitting for like overload? Because I know we've gotten a couple emails to the board about teachers still being in overload. So as we see declining enrollment, I would assume we're also seeing fewer classes in overload. I know Sunny Slope, they had overload last year, and so you'd say, oh, 13, you're down 13 or 14 students, and so we're not seeing that. I don't know if that's something you can answer, if that's something we should talk about in a different way, but like, how are we doing for overload?
That's a great question. Kelly, would it be good for us to update the board in the weekly update? Okay, we'll have an update for you there. Thank you.
John, can I add one quick question
Yeah.
on the Valley? And actually, this is a nice question. I think this is the first time that you're reporting online and in person separately in separate lines.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know whether this is an ongoing multi-year trend. Is there any sense of the trend in online versus in person at Valley?
I can definitely provide the board with a historical trend, but just speaking here, we have seen the Valley Online enrollment drop considerably since its peak during the COVID lockdown years.
Okay.
Yeah. So moving on to student withdrawals. So again, just looking at what's occurred between the summer and beginning of October. And again, almost 60% of students moved to a neighboring district or out of state country. And almost 15% students transfer opted to attend to a private or charter school. If we really wanted to break down, the impact of, one of our concerns last year was the impact of Garden City opening and the expansion of St. Joseph's. And really, we saw very minimal impact at those levels. If we're looking at numbers up here. Again, private and charter school, our largest, again, was Pinnacles at 30 FTE. But if we're looking at Garden City, we had about 13. And if I looked at those numbers, I was being generous in my classification. So one of the on this chart is the unknowns. And if I'm reading the withdrawal reports and they indicate they're going to go to like Pinnacles or Garden City, I will classify them as Garden City. I will give them the benefit of the doubt. I won't leave them in just kind of the gray unknown column. So even being generous, I think of even those on the Garden City, about half of those 13 were still classified unknown. So if they had registered and were part of the school, we would have received an update as them belonging there. So even being on the generous side, we saw very minimal impact with the opening and expansion of the new schools in the area. Again, it still remains the choice, neighboring districts, but a lot of this, again, that's still our largest segment. A lot of students from Eastmont, that's still number one. But these numbers are kind of trending with last year as well.
Sean, would you attribute that large 36.1% of neighboring district, and some of it was impacted by lower, so reduction of a staff due to the budget cuts?
I'm not sure. I mean, when I look down, if we looked at like students who withdrew from Columbia, again, we saw about 13 students withdrew and from the district. And again, half of those were choice and the other half were TK students that went back to their original schools. So just looking in that withdrawal report, it'd be hard to say they withdrew because of budget cuts as opposed to.
I guess more directly say, because I've heard parents who had their kids at Lincoln or Washington who that was in their district school. So their choice was denied to make space for our in-district kids. So with that percent, attribute to some of those kids that we did not renew out of district choice.
I can follow up and dig deeper into the data just so I can give you a more accurate answer.
I mean, I'm assuming so.
Yeah, there was not as many students as you would think that we had to revoke their choice, but we can get those numbers. They were in the teens.
Out of district.
Out of district. Yeah, so we were able to still maintain, and we had, I mean, except with the exception for maybe third grade in particular, the one elementary class that has over 500 students, we were able to retain quite a few of our students. So I was looking for a more dramatic number as well when I talked to Mike about that, but he said it was in the teens, but we can get that information for you.
So just comparing our enrollment programs based on current and prior years. So again, CTE, another year of record high enrollment. And again, similar to what we were seeing last year at this time. So CTE continues to grow and be a popular program. It's funded, and again, CTE is funded by the state separately from our other basic education programs. And so even though variances between actual and budgeted enrollment, they do not impact the funding. So the funding will be adjusted and we'll receive full funding for these programs.
Is this at all changed due to like teachers adding the CTE certification to their, but I don't know the exact terminology, but like as you have more teachers that can teach a CTE class, presumably enrollment's also increasing as those teachers take their students to that CTE designation. Is that some of the growth?
I'm not sure, but I think we can follow up on that and get you that answer. Mm-hmm. Now, when we're looking at Running Start is at record high enrollment. Looking at a couple of factors that just jumped out. One is that, again, our 11th graders were a large class. The prior year they were above 600. Now they're slightly below 500. So again, we never had a 600 plus class coming in. So that might explain just a greater proportion of those students going into Running Start. Another thing is the college Running Start GPA requirements were lowered from 3.0 to 2.5, which might make Running Start a more favorable option to some of the students who might be interested in it. Running Start enrollment generally decreases throughout the year. And then again, these funds are passed through. So yes, we count them towards our overall enrollment and we receive the revenues for them. But all that money is then paid out to the college. Again, as we've discussed, transition to kindergarten, we expanded from 3 classes to 4, and we're at max capacity. And historically, the population remains stable throughout the year. So I don't expect this to be changing much, if at all. And then special education, based on prior trends, SPED enrollment increases throughout the school year. So that's why it looks low compared to prior year. And up, again, it's up 17 from prior month. What I am looking at on special education, we have seen such growth in it over the years. But right now it seems to be on par with prior year enrollment trends. So we're paying close attention to that. And we're looking to see if our special education enrollment may be stabilizing. But again, it's early in the school year and we'll pay attention to those enrollment counts. Alternative learning. So again, we just have a breakout with Westside, Valley Academy, and yes, breaking out Valley Academy and the online source and our skills source. So again, expectation is that ALE enrollment generally increases throughout the year. So even though it's down compared to the budget, but yeah, paying close attention to our online enrollment and then the in-person enrollment at the academy. And so just for context, going back to Martin's earlier question, a clarification about headcount versus FTE at Westside. Here at Valley Academy, it's 180, we can see it's 187 FTE, but it's actually 213 students are at the building. And again, just an overall breakdown comparison between overall enrollment and the different programs. So takeaways. On the positive side, we are doing better than budgeted projections. We budgeted conservatively to address a lot of the unknowns. with Garden City opening up, St. Joseph's Catholic School expanding into middle school. We had no real historical data to work with, so we had to budget conservatively there. The impact of the Columbia Elementary closure, and then indications of record high running start, which did come to fruition. But we saw very little impact and enrollment loss from either private school openings and expansion and the Columbia Elementary closure. I mean, I would say between those two bullet points overall is about 25 FTE. And even looking at some of the withdrawal report data, some of the students, it was choice related and returning to their original school district. So what does that mean? It means more state revenues this year, which is going to reduce our budgeted $4.6 million deficit. So we'll see that as the revenues are adjusted to actual enrollment in January. We'll definitely see the updated numbers and increase in state apportionment monies versus the budget. And it's a positive indicator towards less reductions for next year, although it is just one indicator that factors in, but it's a nice one to have. And again, transition to kindergarten expansion, we've seen that. And then at the elementary level, we see the increase at the kindergarten to first grade. At the high school, the ninth graders, the return of Pinnacles prep students, and then CTE and skill centers. Again, record high enrollment, so positives for those programs as well. Concerns, yes, we are doing better than budget, but overall enrollment is declining and is still projected to decline. Again, one of the factors looking at birth rates in kindergarten classes, again, we had the higher birth rates and our enrollment's roughly the same. So definitely competition from or other alternatives to kindergarten may be placing a factor as we see the increase at the first grade. But it also begs the question, what is this going to mean for our declining birth rates for the next 3 years as we work on our projections for future budgeted years? And as we see those continue to decline and alternative choices being offered, just being prepared for smaller kindergarten classes. Valley Academy decreasing online, but increasing in-person enrollment, again, 213 headcount there as it continues to grow in in-person learning. Again, we're seeing the middle school impact of Pinnacles Prep at 6th grade, but declining enrollment at 8th grade. And also to add, we saw overall declining enrollment at all 3 middle schools so far this year. Again, competition from Running Start. We have record high Running Start enrollment. And then just due to the low birth rates, we're still seeing our graduating classes are larger than our incoming classes. So again, we're paying attention to our 500 plus FTE classes. In 23-24, we had 7 of them, and this year we have 5, which is contributing. So again, just smaller classes just contributes to that overall decline. Here's our updated 10-year enrollment trend and where we're currently sitting at in comparison. So again, our enrollment peak in 2015-16, highlighted in orange on the left. And then we saw the sharp decline in 2021 due to the pandemic. Followed by the reopening in 21-22, but also at the same time, we saw the beginning of alternative education choices such as Pinnacles Prep opening at the same time. And then we're currently sitting at 6584 for our October enrollment. And again, just a high level historical overview of our enrollment. Feel free to peruse at your leisure. Next steps. So currently in October, we now have our highest count of the year and our lowest count of the year. We now have our Running Start enrollment and additional FTE from Westside. We saw the jump from 240 to 260 FTE. So now I'm beginning to update the enrollment projections based on that data. NGT Consulting, formerly known as Davis Demographics, is scheduled to start. So I've been in contact with Marcy Horner, who presented here last April, and we're working on getting her the updated data so she can work on her projections. And then in January, I'm going to refine the enrollment projections again. I like the January enrollment. It's kind of a good bellwether to compare with October. And then I'll be presenting again to the board with our preliminary year-end projections and also an updated 4-year enrollment projection. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate that. Yeah, let's move on to our discussion agenda item here. Get back to my notes here. So we did not have a board meeting last week, but our board members had a busy week, and we had a board workshop on the levy. We had each of them had individual meetings or paired meetings with me. And then we had learning walks at Washington Elementary. And on top of the 150-page board packet they get every 2 weeks too. So it's always a busy time. But I wanted to take a minute to give the board a chance to share their experience at Washington Elementary and the learning walks. So just an open time to chat and discuss. Not everyone at once. No, whoever would like to start, maybe Julie can lead that.
Well, first and foremost, I appreciate our staff making that opportunity available to us. It did feel a little strange walking into a classroom for such a short period of time and being solely focused with our clipboards and things, but it was neat to have the instruction of what they look for going into a class, so we could kind of see the checklist, look for little pieces of behavior to identify, I guess, of whether they're meeting grade level standards with their students. It was fascinating to see the pace in which some of these teachers move with their students. I'd be exhausted if I had to do that all day, but I realize we're seeing them in finite times and in various periods. So I think Tucker and I were paired up, yeah, and we saw a second grade intervention and a fourth grade reading class, and observed staff doing wonderful with their students, and it was apparently they were early in their arrangement. They had just rearranged the groups of students, so with one group of 5 students, they had probably never really worked together, but you could see them just seamlessly going around the table. They just understood the norms of what is expected, and without hesitation picked up on everything they needed to do. It was great to see the teacher use all the various tools and cues to help develop learning, familiarity with words, meaning. Similarly, in the reading class, there were 15 students, I think, in that group, and there were five per group reading different books, all of them a different chapter book, and they were all in the same room, so they knew the norms and customs because their volume was appropriate, and so everyone stayed on focus, which was just astounding to me. And again, these were new groups of students that hadn't worked together, so you could just see their understanding of what is expected through this process when they're in these intervention in whatever periods, that they just, without hesitation, they're paying attention, they were engaged, they were reading, each took their time at the paragraph. We saw students helping each other without skipping a beat, making a big deal of it. And it was just the teacher rotated between the groups and participated with them. And so it was an interesting experience. I think we noted in our sheets that we saw the grade level learning that we were supposed to, or the standards we were supposed to see in most cases. I mean, some things there wasn't enough time to observe them, but it was a unique, neat opportunity. It left me wanting more, and I really appreciate the teachers making themselves available to do that to us, because I'm sure it's not super comfortable for them to have 3 eyes on them, in addition to trying to entertain their students and keep them on focus, which actually shocked me that the students didn't even skip a beat. No reminding of, hey, over here. So it was a fun experience and I'm glad we were able to do that.
I can go next. It really was a great experience, and I want to echo thanks to the learning and teaching trainers and to the faculty teachers who let us go in. I think the students were innocent and ambushed. But it was really informative in seeing the dynamics and behavior in a class. At the end, as an overall conclusion, to me, it was a positive way of seeing how, when you're measuring how you're working, you can do it in a way that's strong coaching and positive. And I think that's really, really important. And then I was in a PE class, and I walked in and I said, well, I wonder what PE is like now. I wonder how much science it in, and they were learning all about bone structures and they would be interested and they were doing their PEE and it was integrated with science. And I thought that was pretty amazing. And then in the reading at first grade, you had to check off, were they speaking, were they listening, were they reading, were they writing? And you see somebody working with 3 letters and you say, well, but then you watch how they manipulate 3 letters and they work through that and you're realizing reading starts at that point. So, yep, I got an education. Thank you.
I could go next. I had the pleasure of seeing a first grade classroom with Miss Hannah and third grade with Miss Reinfeld. And it was very fascinating. It was actually, I got to, Heidi hung out with me, and we were able to identify on the checklist all these different strategies and interactions with the students. First grade class was working on phonology and writing, long P, big P. There's a lot of the chorus, teacher repeat, engagement of students in third grade. Was it sentence structure, identifying keywords? What do we call it, Heidi? Third grade, yeah. And she, Ms. Reinfeld worked, identifying keywords as well as providing some visuals for the students. A lot of the core is interactive learning, partnering, look at your respond, A and B partners, start the conversation. So a lot of, never once in either classroom was there one student working alone or not participating in the lesson. Rock star teachers. So thank you.
Julie did most of the talking for our group, but it was both my kids have either been through Washington or at Washington, so I spent a lot of time there, and it's always fun to see it in a different light of like I have my school board like name tag on and I'm like serious business right now. But it's like the energy of elementary is so fun to be around. Like, all the kids were, as Julie said, the pace was very fast and the kids are all engaged. And, I think it was really impressive to see how, all the classes we went through in the different intervention groups, seeing how engaged they were and how focused they were on learning. So, it was really fun. And then Heidi, appreciate you giving us kind of the heads up of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then the debrief at the end of like, what'd you see? How'd you think that went? And it was great. It was a lot of fun.
I was going to apologize for not being able to make it. I really wanted to be there. I had some commitments up north in OMAC that I had to attend to. But I will be at the next one.
Yes, thank you for that. And we thankfully we have 3 more opportunities throughout this year, and that's exciting, and it just really warms my heart that we're able to have you all in classrooms and be able to see the work that's happening. And I really think that it just helps support whenever Heidi's here presenting and we're talking about our big 6 data points, and you're actually able to see that, and you can triangulate that work into what's happening in the classroom. So it's really fantastic. So I love that. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for sharing, everyone. We have one action item today, and that is to potentially approve our policies that we had first read on October 8th. The only addition that I have to share with you, I also shared in the weekly update to you as a board was to policy 2410, the graduation policy. And that additional information is that it would be this year's sophomores that would be impacted first by the assessment graduation requirement. So I wanted to make sure that came back to you. That was a question that we had on first read. But otherwise, I don't have any additional information to share. So I think that Julie would be looking for a motion, perhaps.
I will entertain a motion on the policy.
Great. I move that we approve the policies that were presented as a first read at the last board meeting. Do you want me to read all these or as presented?
I second that.
It's been moved by Maria, seconded by Miranda. Any discussion? Yes.
I do want to have a discussion on 2410. And I have one question. really, my discussion is on item 4, the requirement to have attempted the SBA. If that is not part of the policy today and is investigated and happens at a later date, what impact does that have on the deadline for making the class of 27 have to comply with that condition? Is that time critical or not?
I don't know if it's necessarily time critical. I think that we want to have the awareness out there to our parents and families, and most importantly, our students. But I believe that the testing doesn't take place until later in the school year in the spring, so we could hold on that.
Well, this is why I want to discuss this issue, because I had the advantage of listening to students talk about it and see their point of view. And it also made me realize that when somebody doesn't take the test, a 0 score is entered and the school looks worse in rankings. What does that do other than look worse in rankings? Well, investors investing in a community look at the school performances, and it could actually decrease economic investment in a community because people look and say, well, that school's not that great. Also, parents look at that and decide where to send their kids to school. And somebody might send their kids to another school, and then that's lower enrollment and lower resources for teaching already. So this is me speaking to the world at large. These are the real consequences, and that's above and beyond employees and teachers and everybody else in the school district really putting their heart and soul into teaching, and then seeing somebody doesn't take the test, and then it looks like they haven't succeeded. So that's a morale one. But I want to focus on the first two because they're real economics. And I don't think, I suspect that to me anyway, that's a motivation for putting that in the policy. And I think it makes sense, but I don't think it's well explained either to the community, and what was evident, it was not understood by the students. And to them, this was, okay, why am I doing this? What's the benefit for me? I could do something better. It wasn't destructive. It wasn't selfish. It was just, nobody's explained to me why it's helpful. And if it was explained to me, I could be a good citizen and help everybody if it was done. So that's why, and I think this is a really good example of the idea I totally support. The precise wording as in the proposed policy, I think may be premature. I would like to see a pause to get deeper student input, see whether we had the right wording, and make sure that we have a way to get out the word and implement it so that students and everybody else understands in a positive way. I mean, I think we want to avoid the situation that this looks like using a whip. What we really want to do is explain why it is a helpful thing and get people to do that. So that's why I asked if it was a critical deadline. I think it would be better. I would be very comfortable with, I'm very comfortable with the rest of the policy, but I would prefer that we hold back on the precise wording of that fourth part of the policy, get some student input, get some understanding, and be sure that we have the way of wording it and implementing it that's going to be successful. So that's for discussion, that is my position.
I guess I'm not following when you say in the implementation, because that would be a procedure versus in the policy.
Yes, it is. And actually, at the last board meeting, I said that the procedure could be used to undo the thing. But actually, listening to the students, I think it's bigger than just the procedure. I think there is a messaging requirement that is greater and an involvement in student. I don't think we necessarily know how to present that in a positive way. I don't, as an adult. I felt I was on somewhat of in a different dimension.
And to speak to that also, because it was at our Superintendent's Advisory Council meeting that we heard some feedback there. And one of the other things that the students mentioned is the testing environment is very different when they move into the high school as opposed to the K-8 world. And so that was one of the things that Eric and I, or Principal Anderson and I, are going to venture down, is figure out exactly what what changes dramatically. We know that in the K-8 world, it's more of a classroom environment where students test. And then as you move into the high school, at least at Wenatchee High School, it's more of an arena style. And so the students mentioned breaks. They mentioned they missed calculated breaks, planned and intentional breaks. They missed snacks. Right. So that's something that we want to make sure that we have some nutrition as we move through in the testing world. And I think they missed, for lack of a better term, just like a nurturing environment. It wasn't that it's not welcoming, but it's the small gym. It's a bunch of chairs. It's very industrial feeling. And I think that they're looking for just a different environment that they get in the K-8 world. So those are some of the additional things that Martin and I heard above and beyond of what he's already shared. And it is an enlightening conversation for sure. So we definitely want to follow up on that.
I guess my thing is that we know as a district, because your first 2 points, as a district, it's something that I feel, and I think by presenting this in a policy format, that is pretty impactful for the district. Test scores, enrollment, credibility. So we know we want it in a policy. What I'm hearing is more of the execution of it. And I'm not sure a policy would be the place to put that in regards to language. I mean, how would we change that? What suggestions would we be getting from students to change number 4 and have the same meaning?
So I think I share Martin's concern, and I look at these other 3 factors ahead of it that all say must complete something using the procedure accompanying this policy. And there's 2 of those elements that say using the procedure accompanying this policy. This 4th element doesn't say anything about a procedure accompanying this policy. And I agree our students should be encouraged to take this test. Quick question though, if they fail, does that count against us, or they're already going to be a 0 if they don't sit for it? So failing is a 0 too. Failing doesn't, it's not like the LSATs where failing is like negative, takes away points. Because I want to, not do anything that's going to hurt us more. Right. But I do think it's important, but I think this element, and maybe the policy is not where the explanation happens, but I do have concern about what does it mean to attempt to pass the test? And have we set up this particular class to be ready to do this? Because I do see the benefit to the district, but I also see a lot of industries now getting away that used to test for entry into their professions, getting away from testing. So how do we educate students that standardized testing is an important element of a graduation requirement? And so I think some of that is maybe help explained in the policy. What does it mean to do this, to satisfy this graduation requirement? Because I am all about improving standards for graduation. So I'm in favor of that, but I don't disagree that it needs a little bit more thinking and fine tuning. And do we have an environment for them to take it in that they'll succeed? Are they educated in why they're doing this and what benefit it has for them to do this? Not we're just taking it so it doesn't look like a 0 on our report card. There's more to it. There's certainly the benefit to the district, but first and foremost, there needs to be the benefit to the student, and they need to understand that as well. So I'm comfortable with adding it as a requirement. I think I would still like to see more of a policy refined in this. So I'm more in favor of holding it for a little bit more development.
Is it, I guess, must attempt is a little bit kind of flaky. Because that can mean a lot of things. And must attempt, it could be a little bit of like a free pass, right? Right. I mean, can we just the student, I guess I'm not sure the attempt is the right word. The student must take.
And that's where I think having the procedure that would go along with this might be helpful to see, because I'm okay with saying that students must sit for or take the test, but then what does it mean to sit for the test? must sit for both portions, to completion, must at least.
Complete?
Yeah, must complete the test.
I mean, it seems like there's value in having someone say, this is a test you have to take. Like, I think we all have had that in our lives where we have to say, this is the test, you have to take it. And this is no consequence, right? The SBA doesn't count toward their graduation requirements aside from taking the test. They're not going to be graded on it. So it's not, they're having the reps on standardized testing in not a great environment, or, maybe that's going to change, but like the high school environment is probably a lot more consistent with what they're going to see in the professional environment. And so you're saying, here are the requirements, and this is not going to kind of go on your permanent record in terms of like how you're going to see your professional life impacted, but you're still going to have an experience with a standardized test that has a weight to it in terms of just, even if it's just the environment. And I don't think there's at any point going to be do you say this? Okay, now it's actually for class of 2028. At some point, we're going to have to bring this around. And I think, yes, we can change the wording, but I don't know that we're going to get a messaging piece around this that's going to get high school students on board, especially freshmen and sophomore high school students. And so I think at some point it's our job to say, this is what's best for the district in terms of having SBA scores versus zeros. And we should push forward with that.
Students must be required to take the SBA. And I mean, it's going to come down to messaging, right? Messaging to the target to students, messaging target to the parents. And again, yeah, it's going to take work. It's going to take a lot of snaps. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I like the language. Sorry, just to interject, but the student will be required to complete the math, reading, and science smarter balance assessment at least once in their sophomore or junior year.
I like that a lot better.
Or it's not a must. It's like you get the opportunity to take something to that effect. But yes, I kind of echo what everybody else says. It's just how we're gonna deliver that message and to students and families on ensuring that this is something that does need to get done. And also, I think just finding a balance with everything at the end of the day, you can't make everybody happy in all of this, but yes, if we remove the word must, yes, it sounds may come off as pressuring, but just saying like, shall to be required or get the opportunity, shall have that opportunity to take it, or trying to word it in a way that this essentially could be a benefit for the student in the long run. That will be something of showing their potential or the growth in their academics that they are engaging in.
I think we're indulging in wordsmithing, and where I'm coming from, I think the one word of messaging, I don't think one wants to write a policy when you're not sure if it's going to be successful, or at least when you see major reasons for it not being successful. So it needs good messaging. And even if we're wordsmithing, I think it might be helpful to have student input into what is the kind of wordsmithing that'll make success. That's just my personal opinion. And as we sit down, let's say we say students are required to sit as an example of the test, but we haven't written in the policy what the consequences are for not doing that. It's an expression of goodwill. You could also write the policy. I don't think we've ever done it, and say, we're going to solve the problem later. That's why I asked if there was a pause. I've said a lot. I'm kind of the one who's delaying it, and I would go around in circles. So I'll stop at that point and let the board work.
What I'm hearing is it sounds like there's enough uncertainty with even just the way that the fourth element is expressed, that maybe we should pull this particular policy, amend the motion to approve the policies with the exclusion of 410 or 4, whatever this one is, 2410.
I don't feel like we need to pull it. I think just changing the beginning of that number 4, that's where I stand, is I liked the wording that you use. I'm concerned that if we're going to let students wordsmith policies, then we are opening ourselves up for other policies involving students. Now, getting their input on creating new policies or, for example, the clothing thing.
Dress code.
Dress code, thank you. That's a little bit different, but we're talking about wordsmithing here. I'm not sure. Now, if to your point, Julie, I'm not sure I'm ready to pull this one, but I'll go with the majority.
I was gonna say the first 3 sections, though, are timely and could be done. We don't have to pull the whole policy. We could delete section 4 for further consideration and amend the policy later.
I think that's the only amendment to this policy. Yeah. So I'm not saying get the policy off the books. I'm saying pull the amendment to the policy.
But then we wouldn't be updating anything on that policy, so we don't need to approve anything.
Right. But that's what I mean, from the motion on the table is to approve the amendment and everything in all the policies. And so I'm suggesting that we pull this amendment from that motion. And then continue to work on the amendment to that policy and bring it back for a second read with the wordsmith, however done, and potentially with a procedure that we can look at to see how it would work. That's, I mean, my suggestion. I'm not saying stop working on the amendment. Does that make sense?
When's the,
Or we can
when's
vote
the,
it
when's the test?
It'll be in the spring. Yes.
So if we take another month to look at do the wordsmithing, at the end of the day, we're not impacting a lot of students in terms of their ability to take the test now, this year, or next year.
Correct. Yeah, I don't think we'd be impacting the student trajectory or this class's need to sit for that test. So we just want, I think the main thing about getting the policy approved and updated and online is so that the schools can begin their outreach with families and parents and properly prepare the students for that, which they can. I mean, we all have already shared the importance of having this as part of a graduation requirement, so they can actually begin that work already. So.
Is there any reason in particular the class of 2027 is picked versus say like this year's 8th grade class, which would be next year's freshman class, and having that start as they know coming into high school, this is a graduation requirement. And I should know what that is because my son's an 8th grader, but I honestly don't know his graduation year. Yeah, so starting with like the class of 2029. So they know as freshmen that they're going to be required to take this as sophomores versus hitting this year's.
Well, it depends how long we want to sit with our low scores and have our scores continue to be impacted. Not low, but continue our scores to be impacted. And I think the longer we prolong this in graduating class, the longer we're opening ourselves to not really seeing the potential of what our high school students and you know, I go back to Martin's first 2 points, the impact that it has on test scores, the reflection of the scores being a reflection of the district, and the economic impact that it has.
And that's fair. What I foresee though is if I'm not suggesting delaying the policy and making it a requirement for this like particular class, but just saying this is going to be the first class that has this as a graduation requirement. I think the messaging is clear going forward to any class that we have now. We need to work on the messaging to encourage them to take tests in the meantime, saying this is going to be a graduation requirement. So teachers start focusing on getting students ready to take it and taking it, and being more clear with our classes that aren't required to take it as a graduation requirement, that this is the expectation of the district going forward, is that you will take it. And this is going to be the first class that actually has that enforced as a graduation requirement. Just a thought. But I mean, for purposes of proceedings tonight, we can either vote the motion as presented, which would approve all policies, including this amendment to this policy. If we did that and it fails because of this policy, then we could pull it out, vote the rest of them, and decide what to do with the other policy.
Is that an option? We can go through. If it fails, then say, okay, let's pull it out. And how do we feel about 2410?
Yeah, and then somebody can make a motion either to approve all the policies without it, and, so
Yeah.
that's a simple way to do it. We can just, and if it
Well-
passes, it'll pass as is.
I would like to amend my motion to reflect the approval of all policies with the exception as presented with the exception of policy 2410 that would read bullet point or number 4 students would be required to take the math, reading, and science smarter balance assessment at least once in their sophomore or junior year, beginning with the class of 2027.
So basically now if we vote, we're just voting on the change in language. Again, with the 2027 as a class. So we vote, see what happens.
Okay. I need a second on the amended motion.
I
Second.
second.
It's been amended by Maria, seconded by Miranda. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
I'm a no. I'm opposed. So
it
passes
passes.
3-2.
That's fine.
All right, superintendent report.
Thank you. Let me get my notes again. Just excited and happy to share that there are so many amazing things that are happening in the school district each and every day. The opportunities that our students have to participate and shine in so many different ways is a testament to the kind of school district I really believe that our community wants. Athletics has been fun to watch and read about. It seems like there's gaining momentum in a variety of ways. We had a lot of wins last week: volleyball, soccer, swimming, football. We saw our girls slow pitch softball win over Davis on the new field, and they advanced to the district playoffs. Where they did not advance, but they still ended up with a 10-6 record. So nice job to everyone there. Wenatchee High School's math team placed third at the recent regional high school math competition, which is super exciting. And they'll have 4 students that will be moving on to the state competition in November. So excited about that. Last week was National School Lunch Week. So I want to give a big shout out to our amazing nutrition services staff. They are amazing. They're making sure that our students are fueled up each and every day with delicious and healthy meals. So thank them for making a positive impact on the lives of our students and for making meal times somewhat of a highlight of the day. I'd share more on homecoming week, but the Wenatchee High School did such a great job sharing everything that's around there. It was I was going to try to make it to the high school to see you dress up as your favorite holiday, because I can just imagine what the school looked like. And I didn't get there, so I'll hit it next time. So also sharing that tickets for the district musical Charlie and the Chocolate Factory are on sale. Performances are starting in mid-November. And then just a message out to our families: parent-teacher conferences are next week. There's no school Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so that we can welcome our families into the school and they can meet their students' teachers. And I really see that annual conference week is such a great opportunity for families to partner with the school. So please be on the lookout for information for your students' parent-teacher conferences next week. And that is my update or report.
We have any board communication? Started that end this time?
Yeah, I only had one, which is impromptu. It was a great 2 weeks with getting involved in all sorts of learning experiences with students and teachers. But piggybacking on the learning walks, 2 of the same people who work in your group there gave in absolutely perfect Spanish to parents and families how they can help their children learn and educate. And the package that was produced was superb. And so the district proves it can do it in 2 languages, things like how you can come to the conference and know how to use it. And I got to see that, and it was very impressive.
First off, I want to apologize to everyone for being late. And I applaud anyone who's watching their kids by themselves. Second of all, I would also add that the Wenatchee High School Pick Six made it to the Sports Illustrated top 10 of the week. So like Sports Illustrated does a, for Washington State, top 10 plays of the week. And so the Pick Six made it onto the internet. Famous. So that's what I got.
I got quite a list. Oh, Miranda.
Well, actually, Miranda had a really, I think this is what I heard. Now that this policy, I don't know, it might be too soon, like maybe too soon. But with parent teacher conferences coming up, maybe it's something that can be a blurb in there, at the high school level. But just a couple things to report. I attended 2 community events, last week. First off, the UW women's softball team was here in Wenatchee on Saturday, and it was really neat to see, although our slow pitch team didn't advance in Moses Lake, they made it back in time to come watch the women softball, UW softball team play. And it was great to see all the pictures of our high school girls and younger softball players with them. And then I had also attended the Chelan Douglas Port Authority Regional Project meeting. And I'll tell you, did you go to that, Corey? Okay. Oh, did you go to the morning one? Because yeah, I mean, we're going in the right direction with the community is, and hearing it says value that on Friday and hearing it says value here. I mean, it's not in the immediate future, but I think our community is moving in the right direction, which will have a positive impact on our bonds and levies.
This is buckle up time.
Yeah. I've been pretty busy the last couple of weeks. So I went and 2 weeks ago, went and thank you guys for submitting your guys' legislative priorities that was issued in the weekly. I do have an Excel spreadsheet over 95 schools participated into that, and it was prioritized. Actually, you'll see a dramatic number of what was the priorities and then where the difference came into. I think it was between mental health and something. I think mental health was the breaking point of what differentiated from it being not as a priority as to some others. Once I find it, I could be able to send that to Corey for him to forward to everybody. And so another thing that was discussed at the legislative committees that we got to meet with Pat Sullivan, who's the director of Office Financial OFM. There you go. Thank you. So he was able to be a guest speaker and kind of speak to us of what we should be seeing in the next couple of years. So there's it. So I kind of had to write it out. So there is an impact in inflation in the budget that they're seeing at a state level as we're seeing it here locally as well. And so what Pat had said that the state is looking at least, so it's not set in stone yet. So this is kind of their projected forecasts until elections are done and everyone has their budgets done and prepared. They're looking at a 5 to 7 billion less available revenue for education. And so that was really a shocker when we were there at the meeting. And that was for a 4-year forecast. And then, so that is going to will directly it'll come into a 2-year biennium budget, and then it has to be created in the coming year. So based on that projected, that's going to be affecting current caseloads and our existing obligations, such as our K-12 education, behavioral health, and such. So if the initiative passes that are currently on our ballots, the amount is projected to be 10 to 11 billion if that initiative passes. So, and that would be for over 4-year period. So at the end of the day, if there is less available revenue to do with anything more, be more reductions at the state level. And so what it's being asked is that from OFM to the state agencies, they're submitting their budget request to not propose a request for anything new for the upcoming budget. And that was what was given to us a couple of years ago. And then also in addition to that, the legislative House and Senate, I believe it was the House, they are looking on implementing their own cell phone use and plan. So whatever the district may do, legislature is creating their own plan to implement cell phone policies. And I don't know if that is going to be heard up at the House during the long session or not, but that is something that was being talked about, that was being discussed as well. And then also with the General Assembly, that was a month ago, over 130 schools had participated into voting to making sure we can set our priorities that we recently voted on, which is, I guess, the highest numbers that WASDA has seen in most recent years. And then also, and I also attended last week. I'm just all over the place. I got that last minute opportunity. I was invited by another colleague from the legislative committee to attend to the Washington Association Latinos Administrators and Superintendents in Pasco. So I was able to come and sit on Saturday to listen to a couple keynote speakers and sit in on a couple sessions, and a couple guest speakers from different school districts weren't unable to attend. So I was invited last minute to be one of their guest speakers. So that was pretty, pretty exciting. Yes, very last minute, but on advocating on how to get the Latino population involved in our school districts, how to best advocate for our minorities, and building a stronger board in the district. So that was a really great opportunity. I did see some admin staff from Wenatchee there. That was great. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm hoping that the board can have the opportunity to go next year, because that was something that was very advocated for, because not very many board of directors from other schools attend to these events. It's mainly administrators and the board of staff with Wallace. So I think it's be something great to go to and learn next year. Okay, that's it. Okay.
Well, despite a very busy week, I have little to report. I did all the assigned meetings, the workshops, the learning walks, the one-on-ones, all the required board stuff. And then I did take in a few of the homecoming activities. I saw the Powder Puff game on Monday. So, varsity girls soccer took that title. So that was fun to see my daughter finally participate in something like that. Their soccer game, I think, was the following night. So they're on still their streak. Tough game tonight. We'll see. So yeah, it was just too much to do, too little time, and nothing new to report. And so with that, it looks like we have an executive session. The school board will now recess into executive session for a period of 30 minutes until 8:11 to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a staff member. Pursuant to District Policy 1410 and RCW 4230-110, this discussion will be closed to the public. The school board is not expected to take final action following the executive session. I'm going to update that to 8:12 to give us a minute to get back. All right.
It's 30 minutes.
I don't, that's what my script says. I can revise the time before we're,
Yeah, Kelly, do you need 30 minutes?
okay.
you
Do you
wanna
want me
go-
to start with like 15 or 20 instead? Okay, so amending my executive session statement, the board will now recess into executive session for a period of 15 minutes to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment. We are not expected to take final action. We will come back from executive session at 7:50. Help me with the math. 7:50.
Thank you for that. Any longer.
No, that's all right. I'm all good. Oh. All right, the board has completed its executive session and the meeting is now adjourned.